Have a look at the t-shirt you're wearing, or maybe the shoes on your feet. What if I told you there was a hidden code, a global accounting standard that's about to force the companies who made them to get real about their environmental and social impact? Well, today we're cracking that code and figuring out what it means for all of us.
So, let's just start with a simple question. You're looking at two different brands, and they're both talking a big game about being eco-friendly or ethically made. How do you really know who's walking the walk and who's just, greenwashing? It's a huge problem, right? Because without a common set of rules, those claims are basically impossible to actually compare.
But what if there was a rule book, a single global standard that made companies report on their sustainability stuff just like they have to report on their financials? Well, guess what? That's not a what if anymore. It's actually happening.
And this is where things get really serious. We're talking about the heavy hitters of global finance getting involved. The IFRS Foundation. These are the folks who oversee global financial accounting. They've now put their new board, the ISSB, in charge of these things called the SASB standards. This is a massive, massive step toward creating one single, authoritative rulebook for sustainability.
So what's the whole point of all this? Well, the goal is to create a common language. Just like we have dollars and euros so we can all understand value, these standards are meant to give us a universal way to measure a company's impact. And that means investors, and yeah, even you, can finally get reliable info you can actually compare.
Now, to make that work, they needed a way to organize pretty much every company on the planet. And that brings us to a system with a kind of technical name. But trust me, the idea behind it is pretty simple. Let's break it down.
Meet SICS, the Sustainable Industry Classification System. The easiest way to think about it is like a Dewey Decimal System, but for corporate sustainability. It sorts the entire economy into 77 different industries. Why? Well, because the sustainability challenges for a software company are totally different from the challenges for, say, a clothing brand.
So you can kind of picture this whole thing as a funnel, right? It goes from really broad down to really specific. At the very top, you've got the IFRS Foundation setting the global stage. They create the ISSB to do the actual work. The ISSB then uses the SASB standards as their toolbox. And finally, the SICS system is what points to a specific company and says, okay, you need to use these specific tools. It's a super clear path from the 30,000-foot view right down to a single factory floor.
For this explainer, we're going to follow that funnel all the way down. We're going to zoom in on just one of those 77 industry codes to see exactly how this whole thing works in the real world.
The code we're focused on is CGAA. Okay, so it's part of the consumer goods sector, but what does it actually mean?
It stands for Apparel, Accessories, and Footwear. That's right, we're talking about the global fashion industry. All those brands making the stuff we see and wear every single day.
And the scope here is incredibly broad. This standard doesn't just apply to the brand with its name on the label. No, it covers the entire life cycle, from the first design sketch, through the complex manufacturing process, to the wholesalers, and all the way to the final retail store. And it covers everything from your kids' clothes and that fancy watch, to handbags and sneakers. The point is to make sure that no part of that whole chain can hide.
Okay, so what does this standard actually force these companies to report on? Well, it boils everything down to 4 key topics that really get to the heart of the industry's biggest, and let's face it, ugliest challenges.
And here they are. First, chemicals in products. Simple question. Are there harmful chemicals in your t-shirt that could hurt you? Second, the supply chain's environment. This gets into things like water pollution from dyes and the energy used in factories. Third, and this is a huge one for fashion, supply chain labor. Are workers being treated fairly and kept safe? And finally, raw materials sourcing. Where did that cotton, that leather, that wool actually come from? And what was the true cost of producing it?
So we have this very specific, very detailed standard. That's great. But beyond all the corporate paperwork, why does an accounting rule like this truly matter for the real world?
This quote from the standard itself really gets to the core of it. Look at the words it uses. It's all about risks and opportunities that could affect a company's cash flows, its access to finance, or its cost of capital. In other words, it connects sustainability directly to money.
And that right there is the absolute game changer. These standards take sustainability out of the feel-good marketing department and drop it right on the desk of the chief financial officer. A company that's polluting a river isn't just an environmental problem, it's a financial risk. A company with unsafe factories isn't just an ethical problem, it's a huge reputational risk that can hammer sales. This changes the entire conversation.
So, the next time you pick up a piece of clothing, just think about this standard for a second.
Think about those 4 big questions it forces brands to answer. It's like a quiet revolution in transparency, and it's happening right there in your closet. So the real question is, now that you know what's being asked behind the scenes, will you ever look at a simple clothing tag the same way again?